So yeah, welcome to today's webinar. We're going to be talking about GS1 codes and lean procurement. We've got Phil and Chris here. I'll let them introduce themselves in a minute. But just before we get going, we'll basically be taking questions through the Q&A box today. So if you're unfamiliar with this functionality, it's basically the same as a chat box. The only difference is you'll be able to upvote each other's questions. So if you see a question and you agree that you would like it answered, then you can press the thumbs up button and that will kind of bring it to our attention more quickly. You can ask us anything, ask us throughout the session if you have any queries. You can also comment on other people's questions. So if it's something like a technical point or a document that's mentioned and you want to find it, if you can help someone with that, then do go ahead and comment. Technical issues, obviously I've said, I'll get to those. We'll be recording the session and sharing the recording afterwards. It will take a couple of days for it to be uploaded, but it should be mid next week. And we'll also send around any slides that are shown as well. I think that's just about everything from me. So without further ado, I'll let Chris and Phil introduce themselves. Thanks.
Thanks, Naomi. Hello, friends, and welcome. My name's Chris Grant, and I'm Partnerships Manager at Digital Construction Skills. And the topic of today's Lunch and Learn is the GS1 Standards and Lean Procurement. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Phil Thompson, Procurement Data Manager from leading MEP contractor NG Bailey. And we're going to discuss how these key elements have transformed their procurement processes. So we'll see how these fit into the context of the golden thread and what we need to do as an industry to adapt product information standards more widely and more quickly. So Phil, you're very welcome. How are you getting on?
Very well, thanks, Chris. Thanks for the introduction.
Good stuff. So we'll get straight into it then, shall we? So we just tell people who you are then, Phil, what your role is and a little bit about NG Bailey.
Okay, thank you. So as you've already said, Procurement Data Manager, that role really all the product data that runs into our procurement systems and estimation systems. So all the information that we consume when we want to place a requisition, purchase order, etc. It's what underpins those platforms. In terms of NG Bailey, for those that are not familiar with us, we do have a fair pedigree. It's been doing this over 100 years now. And we've got a number of different businesses, but the core of our business is the engineering, roughly with a turnover about 573 million. So, you know, we're a fairly significant player. I think last time I looked, we're the largest independently owned. So we've been doing this quite some time.
Brilliant, Phil. So, Phil, we're all here to talk about lean procurement and the GS1 standards today. So, you know, maybe just take a wind back to the start. You know, what were the initial problems you were finding in the procurement processes then that prompted you to act in the first place? And how did you go about getting to grips with it?
So the journey really wasn't centered around procurement. I was working in a previous role around specifically supporting lean construction, looking at our on-site activities, doing video analysis, looking at how we could improve productivities. We'd done a number of visits to automotive manufacturers to try and understand what other sectors did. And we were on this journey of improvement. And quite often when we were looking at lean, non-value add, value add waste, etc., it was obvious that there was a tie back there to procurement, typically to the transactional process, materials being delivered, wastage, returns, breakages, all that kind of thing. So it led us down this path of keep revisiting the need to improve our procurement processes. So that's when we started to look at that in more detail as a specific lean activity. Okay.
And what inspired, was it then to do with the Latham and Egan reports that were around at that time? We talked this before, but how did they influence this?
Well, they've always been there as a great foundation for you know, explaining the issues in the industry. I mean, if you go back sort of 26 years to when those reports and many reports that have followed them as well, they pretty much say the same thing. You know, that the industry is quite siloed, it's fragmented, it's adversarial, and it's this need to drive improvement and ultimately greater collaboration. But I have to say, even today, even you know, all that time after those reports, we're still not seeing the level of collaboration, certainly around information management, digital procurement, etc. We're not seeing the changes that those reports advocated.
Well, that's it, and that's borne out in the fact that we've got the Farmer report and the Hackett reports. So effectively, you know, it's kind of all the stuff we've done in the Latham Egan reports all came to fruition. It still seems like we haven't moved forward in many ways. So maybe tell us about the platform itself. How does it work, and what do you do with it?
So what we did is when we started to look at the actual procurement transactions themselves and listening to the feedback from engineers and supervisors about the frustration they were having with the process and the supply chain and materials and the level of sort of ambiguity. We then looked at our internal processes. And again, we just, did a sort of process map looking at how we process data, requisitions, etc. And if you think back to the kind of good old days of construction, when I started as a tradesman, which was in '88 as an apprentice, and then the procurement activities would have been led very, very traditional processes using fax machines, maybe even just done it verbally over the phone. And then that transitioned over a period of time to use ERP systems and digital platforms. But the truth of the matter is that the information in those platforms was never really managed, so it wasn't looked at in a way to make it work. It was all very much handballed, handwritten information, allowing people to describe items in their own particular way. And all that information, you basically created a garbage in, garbage out approach. So the that we output to the supply chain was poor in many cases. So was it any wonder that the materials we received or the orders off the back of that didn't match that expectation? So the platform we developed really with our current data vendor was fairly simple. It's not a complex platform. In essence, it's an e-catalog. It's an aggregation of part data, of information that you would get from many different managed websites, from different catalogs, and it brings it together in one hub, one central source of truth. And from that, then you can start to use that to drive the information through your transaction. So the platform, to answer your question, the platform itself is it's pretty much no frills.
No frills, right? Okay. So, well, maybe we'll move it on then, Phil. Just to talk about this in the context of procurement, can you explain to us then, what do we mean by the golden thread, and why is it important?
Okay, well, maybe just to expand on that a little bit, if I just put my screen on now and show just a couple of slides. Well, I'll just set this up 1 second, because these may help to explain the issues that we have and where it all kind of stems from. So hopefully you can see that screen now. Is that come up, Chris?
Yeah, you're good there.
Okay, so really, let's start with the basics. If we look at transactions and processes, in the world of procurement, what we need to be considering is the very basic of information. The SKU, which is typically the stock keeping unit, is how we order that from the supply chain. We need to give the supplier an instruction about what we want and how we want it delivered. So typically, they look at these items on this particular slide. They may be the same product in terms of the actual item and the technical specification, but ultimately it's delivered or handled in different ways. So cable, for instance, one type of cable may be a cut to length product because it's a specific length required for the project, or they may be just ordered in different drums. And of course, different drum lengths, because what you don't want is you don't want to be short, or you don't want to be purchasing waste. Because if you want a 60-meter run, are you going to buy a 100-meter coil, or are you going to buy a 500-meter coil and get multiple runs out of it? So this information management, these products at this particular level, one of the issues is they've not really been addressed in the procurement world, but they have been. People have tried to address them in the world of BIM, etc., and the sort of digital twins, in terms of the way the information presents itself through a model. But there's been no correlation back to the actual procurement process. What do we order in the first instance? I suppose the point is, Chris, is where does the thread start? If there's another slide, again, just to emphasize, because we are an MEP company, mechanical products as well, and bracketry, all has the same scenarios, the same complexities around it for cut lengths and linear products. Hope that makes sense.
Hi, so you mentioned there about BIM then having and the Hackett report I touched on earlier, it has an important role to play in delivering this golden thread. But what does BIM actually do for you just now, Phil?
Well, we're involved in BIM like many organisations, and we have developed our own platforms and information to handle the the BIM data, the geometry information, to make it easier to go about the installation. Perhaps we might do the whole job in a model, or we might just do pinch points. It depends on the project and the complexities of it, really. But the problem is that the BIM agenda generally, although it's has been a force for good, in my view, there's been an element of perhaps mis-selling with it, because it's taken the many manufacturers down the path that if you create this geometry information or your BIM files, it'll solve many problems. Well, it will solve some problems, but it's actually created others. And specifically around data management, it hasn't addressed the need for better information around products which are not in a BIM model. So if we look at another example, these products here are required by contractors on majority of projects that are being worked on. Now, they are consumables or tools, etc., which are used to facilitate the installation. However, they're not going to be used in the model. You're not going to see setting tools or a meter of some description in the model. It's almost irrelevant. However, we are required to order these with specific information that the manufacturer has asked us to make sure that we're using that, for instance, a setting tool, to make sure that it works with their fixings, something like a crimp system for pipes or electrical. It's really imperative that we order the appropriate product to facilitate the installation. But as I said, these are not going to appear in the model. So, there are a number of examples. Even when you go down to something like cleaning and welfare, we want to, and PPE, we want to order products with accurate structured data that will not go in the model. But that is still forms part of the golden thread. We need to present that information to ensure the integrity of the installation.
That's a big challenge, then, Phil, drilling into that level of detail. And is there much pushback? Are you getting any traction in this? Getting this as a thing on an agenda? We do. Is it still ignored?
We do. The problem is that the industry generally hasn't really switched on to the fact that all information management is still a requirement, and a lot of the discussions in the world of BIM and digital construction generally don't really seem to encompass procurement transactions and the product data associated with those. And even if you think of something as very basic as a drill bit, so an SDS drill bit used for drilling a hole in concrete is probably used up and down the United Kingdom. Those drill bits from a reputable manufacturer come with a particular stamp, which basically demonstrates that the diameter of the hole you're going to drill is to the standard, is going to meet the standards. So we know if it's a 5.5 or 6 millimeter drill bit, that's the diameter of hole you're going to get. Now, if we just go to the supply chain and say we just want a drill bit and just give them a dimension without giving them a specific part number, then there's a chance that they may supply just a generic off-the-shelf import unbranded product. Now, if that reaches site and the engineer just picks that drill up, drills the hole, and then uses that hole to install an anchor, which the manufacturer specified it has to go into a particular size of hole, and there's a mismatch between the hole and the anchor, and then we don't meet the loadings or the design calcs for the job, then we're in a sticky situation. So it's really imperative that all products, and I mean all products, are considered in this process.
Okay, so maybe we talked about your platform a wee minute ago, but we just go back to it again then. So what, does it give you this level of detail, your platform, or how does it work? I mean, how are you identifying these products just now? You must have some sort of traceability. Maybe tell us a wee bit about how that process works. And then we'll come on to the GS1 standards and how that all fits into it.
Okay, yeah, so very simply, our current data provider it acts as a central version of the truth. It acts as a hub, or sometimes called a data lake of information. So all the products that we would want to procure would, whether they're complex M&E items that would be installed in the building, or whether they're welfare products or consumables, all the data is structured in the same way, and it has a unique identifier against it. In the platform itself, it uses the database code, which then gives us a unique ID, which we can use to pass to the supply chain to differentiate products, and also run reports from as well. Because unless you're actually identifying a product at SKU level with a unique identifier, then you can't run reports off the back of that. You're going to be stuck with a commodity code, which is a higher level code, which just gives you a category of products, but there's no guarantee that each product within that category is the same.
Okay, so then, so Phil, can you just explain then, how does the GS1 standards fit into what you're developing on the platform and how you're using the platform? Now, where have they come from? Maybe just give us a kind of a general overview of what they are, and then we'll take it back into your context of your platform. But what are the GS1 standards? Where do they come from, and how are they typically used? And why are they important, both in terms of this solution and for information management more generally?
Well, I've just moved on the slide. Hopefully you can see that. So
if
we think about the transactional working model, the way information moves around the supply chain. And you look on the left-hand side of this model, you've got the actors in the supply chain that are the manufacturers. They're providing the physical products into the supply chain, into buildings, etc. But they have information in relation to them, catalogs, websites, etc. Now, they're all providing their data in a very ad hoc way. They're all perhaps doing their best, but it's all different. And, it can be complex products or it can be simple PPE, etc. And then on the right-hand side here, we've got the pull. We've got us as the contractor. You've got ERP systems. You've got BIM systems, platforms, client as well, all this data. We're all consuming that. We're pulling the data from those manufacturers. It's just, moving along the supply chain. Now, in this particular case, this model represents what it happens really at the moment, all the perception around what happens. So you've got everybody's trying to support each other in their own particular way. So, for instance, in the past, the distributor may have gone to a number of manufacturers and said, here's our template, can you please fill it in because we need your part data in order to provide information and price files for. But of course, each different distributor will have a different format, a different way of sourcing that data, and then they'll go to different manufacturers. So the manufacturers are receiving multiple requests for data, but they're filling it in a different way. So consequently, you've got this mismatch of different formats. And of course, digitally, it might be an Excel, it might be a PDF, CSV files, some might be API connections, but ultimately, it's all very, very varied. So if we then think about this in terms of GS1, GS1 offer standards, they offer single unique identifiers that you can allocate against your products. So what that would do, that was lead us into something like this. Now, if, for instance, the industry, this is our, I suppose, the panacea of where we think we should be, and this utilizes this kind of adoption of the golden thread. The industry got behind and supported GS1 standards and used the single unique identifiers in the same way that retail and pharmaceutical do. Then we have the potential to be able to create this agnostic data set, this single source of truth, genuine single source of truth, which is being fed into and supported by the supply chain, manufacturers, etc. And then the pull from that data is being taken out by BIM providers, ERP systems, distributors. And we're taking the same data out. And everybody, regardless of their level of competition or where they work in the supply chain, they're taking the data out in an agnostic, transparent way. And we stop, at this point, you can stop data being competitive. It needs to be collaborative. We need to work together to provide this consistent single version of the truth. So GS1 can currently provide that because there's evidence in other sectors and in construction parts of the world.
Phil, maybe just take a wee wind back then. So where is it typically used? Is it retail and healthcare and things like that? Just to give an example of where would we come across a GS1 standard, and we might not even know it.
So a GS1 standard would be represented in retail by a barcode. So the barcodes that are on the labelling, the popular packaging that we all use when we go into supermarkets, that is underpinned by GS1 standards. So that barcode and the 13-digit number that sits underneath that is the unique identifier. Obviously, it can be machine readable by scanning systems, etc. But fundamentally, in construction, it can create a single version of the truth by having a reference, a key of information that you can pass in the supply chain, and you can trust the fact that it's the same product. We're all talking about the same item just by using one reference. Within GS1, I'm not the GS1 expert. They've got I think it's 115 organisations across the globe that manage these codes, and they do this on a not-for-profit basis. But they do work in healthcare, pharmaceutical, They work with the NHS, and I think there's probably 8 or 9 countries globally that are further advanced than the UK is in terms of the adoption for construction.
Okay. So in terms of your own specific solution, then how did you come across GS1, and how did they get involved with what you're doing just now? Can you tell us a wee bit about that integration process? And what's involved with it?
I will, yeah. And the best way to explain that is to look at this particular model, which is, this representation. This really shows us why we went looking for a solution, because we were almost reached an impasse. We were working with our current data provider, which provides, good structured data and supports our own business platforms. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that then when you send that information out into the supply chain, into, you're looking at up and downstream transactional processes, it falls over because people do their own thing. And as much as you might try and say, well, do what we're doing, there's no incentive for them to do that, because commercially they're led by their own platforms, their own data systems, their own culture. So, we went looking for something better, if you like. And this really, what this model is the two processes overlaid. You've got the traditional way of working, and then you've got data hubs and pools that have come into the environment in the last few years, and it's become, as I said, it's become competitive. People trying to offer their data. And one of my bugbears at the moment, Chris, is that there's a number of papers out there and discussions going on encouraging manufacturers to get better data. So that gets the thumbs up from me. We want manufacturers to provide better data. But then what do they do with it? If they then make a commercial decision about who they give that data to in order to make it available into the marketplace, and that then those decisions are led through some marketing opportunity, and people manipulate that data and change it, and it becomes inoperable, then we've missed the whole point, and that then is undermining what the manufacturer does.
Well, and it's all undermining the spirit of the digital built Britain, isn't it? Data for the common good as well, that we need to be trying to work towards. Okay, so what are you seeing any positives though? I mean, is there collaborations happening, in that space, or is it still siloed?
We are? I think, unfortunately, there is work being done. I'm involved in a number of working groups, and there are some actors in the supply chain that are getting behind this, and we're trying to learn from what other countries do. But ultimately, no, we still haven't reached that kind of groundswell moment yet, where people accept that there needs to be a single unique identifier. Even before we get into the conversation, is GS1 the solution for the industry, which I personally believe it is, because of their pedigree in other sectors. But really, what we're looking for is, and this image hopefully demonstrates that, is the baton, is a piece of information that we can pass, that we can trust, that we give to the supply chain. And coming back to your comments about the digital, the golden thread and the digital twins, for my mind, these will be, these processes will be enhanced by the adoption of this single unique identifier. So okay, good, right. So what was I going to say? So what have been the key benefits, Phil? To you, I mean, just your platform itself, in this lean, take it from a lean aspect. What do we mean by lean in the terms of what's it done for you as a business? What is the tangible results when you combine identifying digital information and taking that golden thread through? What benefits do you get? Oh, benefits. Well, it's always difficult to measure benefits because it's not really about savings. It's sometimes about cost avoidance. So in terms of our processes, we now measure the integrity of the lines that leave our business. Now, we never did this in the past because it wasn't possible. You can't measure the integrity of information if there's nothing to measure. So now the fact that we have consistent, interoperable data that we can use consistently and repeatedly, so the engineers place in demand based on particular codes, and that then leaves the business, and the next order can follow that in the same structure. We can then measure that. And we know that we're running sort of, depends on the region, but we would say upside of 95% of every line that leaves our business has got a single unique identifier. Now, that's not currently the GS1 code towards the adoption of that in our business, but currently our own data that we take from our vendor. That's the key that we use, and that's the measure that we're using at the moment. We do want to move to GS1 standards, but obviously there's work to do with manufacturers.
And so when you're getting all this, you must be working with, like, NG Bailey must be working with a lot of suppliers with a lot of data and a lot of pricing information. So how do you like make that a lean process? Do you do a bit of sorting with this platform using codes? Is there only certain codes that you can use for a project, and then does that link back to this golden thread so that you're tying back that data to the project information? How does that work?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, you're right. So the approach that we take is obviously, first of all, you have to have an understanding of the entire data available, the industry as a whole, before you understand where you position yourself. So if you looked at the data that's available in the largest data pool in the industry, you're looking at about 1.4 million lines. Now, that's a lot of products. Now, clearly our supply chain is a subset of that. So our largest data feed, we have about 6 feeds, is 800,000 lines. So we're consuming data from in that volume, and that's from probably 250 manufacturers. So all of that information comes into our platform. We then use the platform we developed to separate out the kind of wheat from the chaff. So what we do is, if we have a commercial or technical agreement to purchase a particular product from a manufacturer, we lock the data. So we hide all of the brands that we don't want to be purchased from within that kind of subcategory. So if it's bracketry, for instance, we have a manufacturer that we align with for bracketry. All of the manufacturers of bracketry, the data's there, but it's hidden. Engineers can access it, because that when we force or we channel the procurement activity through that manufacturer, which means that we're getting that technical support and the commercial leverage as well. But equally, if we are buying products that are led by the client, we consume all the data. So we may be working on different clients up and down the country. They may have different requirement for a light fitting brand or sanitary ware. So we don't restrict that, we just consume the data. And if there's a new product comes to marketplace selling light fittings and they become quite popular, they meet all the standards, then we'll just pull the data in. We'll add 1,000 lines, 10,000 lines. It doesn't make a difference. The important thing is that we can use the structured data in the long term.
Good stuff then, Phil. So Phil, you touched on that you're not using the GS1 standards maybe in anger as much as you would like. So as so much you're using a key source data, which you maybe explain that the key source data you're using just now, and possibly what GS1 standards you've got, what percentage is mapped across to this just now at the moment, if you know what I mean. So you've got the Trimble Lookins you use as your source data.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, our current vendor is Trimble, and with the Lookins platform that drives all our data into our business platform. And we've used those for many years, and they provide a really robust service for it. But in terms of the adoption of GS1, then their data pool that they provide has we've just been doing some work on it this week, about 556,000 SKUs on their database has a GTIN. I just noticed someone's put in the question and answer actually about GS1 is the EAN code. Yeah, that's the same. It's referred to globally, it's the GTIN, which is the global trade ID number, but domestically it's still referred to as the EAN, or European article number, but it's the same in essence. It's just a different way of describing it. But obviously we can't adopt the GS1 until we get to reach that point where you've got all items or sufficient items that you want to transact that have got the code allocated to them. Now there's many manufacturers that have got, I think, the entire, from memory, the entire data set, I think there's about 890 manufacturers on the database, and there's about 500 manufacturers that have got GS1 standards, or they've got the codes, and many of those have got 100% match. So if they've added 10,000 lines or 100 lines to the database, every single one has got a GTIN against it, which is brilliant. But of course, it's where you've got the gaps, where manufacturers haven't maintained that data, or they don't have the codes available yet. There's work to do to align that.
So what work are you doing in that direction then just now, Phil? Beyond what you're doing at NG Bailey at the moment, what are the efforts going on in the industry in this kind of product identification standards space? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so there's a number of work streams going on. There's a working group with GS1 that they're leading, looking at really the adoption of the GTINs into construction. So we've been learning from other countries like GS1 Ireland, for instance, in the Nordics, where they've been doing, they've been doing a lot more, because there's complexities not just around some of the products I've described, which might be commoditized items, very easy off-the-shelf products, which do align with the retail products. They're fairly easy to address. It's when you get more complex construction products like steelwork, for instance, or aggregates. So the GS1 standards do have solutions to cover all these in terms of serialization, batching, and even asset and location tagging. So it is possible to do that, but you've got to start with the basics first, which is it's the bottom of the pyramid, and it's working those commoditized products and move up, and start to adopt them.
And are we getting any alignment at the moment, Phil? What challenges and barriers are you seeing at the moment? I can imagine there's a lot of vested interest in this and stakeholders to navigate to get that bottom of the pyramid into some sort of sense.
There is, and the industry is very large, very complicated and fragmented as well. So the problems are there's a cultural lack of, there's a resistance to do something different. Just change generally sometimes is difficult. There's that ignorance of what the solution does and why do they need to do it. Then you've got the issue of the push and the pull. So the manufacturers create this in the first place. Well, we think they should, but unless more people ask for it, if they place demand on the system in terms of an expectation around the codes, unless they have it on a roadmap, then why should manufacturers do anything? Because it's a common argument I hear when I engage manufacturers is their response is, well, you're the only one who's asked for it. And yeah, okay, that's a fair point. But unless we all start to ask for it, and then of course there's the contractor space. So equally, unless they're going to consume the data, because if we were looking at an 100% match on a GTIN code now in the entire construction sector, if nobody adopted it, used it to control, to purchase, to GRN, to invoice, to establish materials on site, then why should it be supported? So it's going to take every actor in the supply chain, right from that design to demolition process, to start to make demands on it, and ultimately the client as well, Chris. If the clients need to see that this is will provide a solution for them for things like maintenance, etc. But until we reach that point, it's a hard sell.
Well, Phil, I'll just a couple of questions here. I'll just fire them to you. So it says there's a comment here that the items that are not modeled could be shared into the data model as a separate data table with structure, and that's efficient.
You could do, but my question back to that would be where are you getting that data from and what you're basing it on? Because if it's only based on manufacturer part codes, or it's only just sits into a taxonomy, then without the single unique identifier, something that says that key is that product unequivocally, then I doubt what the integrity of that information.
So you're still talking back to that fundamental bottom of the pyramid again, yes. where that's coming from. Yes. And if we get that all to be aligned, okay, so another couple of questions popping up. How do you make sure all estimation systems are included in the solution?
Well, that would be down to the, again, the demands, what's the word I'm looking for? For the vendors that provide these platforms, they need to embrace the option to have these codes in their platforms. Many people already do, but if you're currently aligned with a provider of a digital platform and they don't have the provision to bring in this code to give you that, to look up that match, that mapping, then it is going to be a challenge. So these, as well as manufacturers, etc., technology providers have also got to get on board with this, and some of them already have.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'll just keep adding. They kept firing them in. I'll just keep firing them over to you.
Yeah, go for it.
Do NG Bailey populate their trade design fabrication models with GS1 codes currently when they're available? So,
no, we currently use the TSI, which is our preferred code from our data vendor. However, we can map that fairly quickly because we have access to the codes. The problem is that if we map the GS1 now, there would be gaps because there are some manufacturers that don't currently support those codes. So we don't want to be providing data where there's going to be gaps in there. So we're currently using the just the TSI to drive that, and we do have through an API connection into our design platform, we can pull those codes in to give us a match. In fact, I was on a call earlier on just before lunch to look at our prefabrication process that we have for things like distribution boards and valve sets, and that's going to be pulling in these exact same data sets.
Okay, so another question. Clearly, there is a people adoption challenge to overcome, and we'll maybe come back onto that again shortly again. But how much of the way forward depends on a software tool or service for vendors to connect to? And I think you kind of touched on that again. But if so, where are these tools? Well, I know there's certainly platforms, asset management platforms out there like Fexelon that have used GS1 standards. But what's your experience of that, Phil?
Well, again, it's something we've been talking to our platform providers about. But you know, the question Andy's putting there is pertinent, because we need everybody in the whole supply chain, you know, as I've said, from that design to demolition process, and everyone who's involved in it, to support this process, to get behind the adoption of single version of the truth within platforms, within business processes, physically as well, obviously, you know, because the code can be carried on the product as well. People need to recognize that that's the key that they would use to establish that's the item they want, and not use localized siloed part codes or just manufactured part codes, because they could easily be duplicated.
Okay, a question in here from, we'll just see. We've looked at ETIM before, which seems to be used more widely in Europe and focuses on classifying construction products into categories. Do you need something like this in combination with a unique identifier like GS1 to compare products from different suppliers?
Okay, so it's an emotive subject. The ETIM classification system, which is currently being rolled out in the UK. The problem is, I think there's still some misunderstanding between classification systems and unique IDs, because you can have multiple classification systems. You could have Uniclass, you could have ETIM, you could have a local taxonomy. That would be fine. You can have those. I mean, for instance, the data that we use through our preferred vendor, they have what they call their house standards. And they've used those for many years, and we understand what those are. But they can also be mapped to an ETIM classification, so it's not difficult, but it's not the same. And we have to be clear: it's definitely not the same as a unique identifier. And the way to think about this is that, excuse me, if classification systems are great when it comes to product selection. So if you look at the design phase of a project, when decisions are being made about which products we would use, it's great to be able to look at a classification or a category and say, okay, which are the preferred products based on, you know, maybe a technical assessment in this category, and you can differentiate between those products. That's great. And then the other time that you might want to use them is when there was products are going to be at end of life and they're getting replaced by maintenance contractor or clients looking to replace them. You can look at what you've got and then look at what's a current equivalent. They're great for that. However, that's only 2 points really in the construction process where they really start to come into their own. The rest of the time, what we need is the button. We need the information to pass. Now, in the world of procurement transactions, I don't need to know our product's classified, and we almost don't care. It doesn't matter. You tell me what you want us to purchase and install on your project. Give us a unique reference for it, which everybody recognizes, and we know we're going to get that product back when we order it. And again, it's the button. So give us the button. We'll do the work on the button that we need to, and we'll pass the same button to the supply chain. They'll bring it back in form of the product, and we'll pass the information relating to it to the client. And you've got the basis of your golden thread.
Okay, well, I'm going to. There's not one more question. I'll come back to that in a second. But I thought maybe just seeing we're on topic here about different kind of product identification standards there. BSI, Phil, they've just recently launched a product identification standard scheme. And does that largely do the same thing as the GS1 standards? What's your thoughts on that?
Okay, my thoughts on the BSI Identify solution is no, it's not the same as GS1 standards. It's similar. They're providing their UPIN solution into the industry as an option to be adopted. However, theirs is a digitally based solution. It provides information based on a unique reference that will remain in perpetuity. However, it doesn't provide any information that specifically can be added to the product. Now, the GS1 standard is a unique number. So that unique number can be used in any database or even embedded into a URL to reference the product. But ultimately, there's a distinct difference between just something that exists in a digital environment and something that does both. And our opinion is that the GS1 solution, or the standards and the code that is related to a product, because it's both physical and can be digital, then you tick both boxes. Whereas the BSI solution is going to provide one element of that. I mean, you could obviously you could produce a localized QR code or barcode and put it on the product, but the standards already exist around GS1 globally that people do.
Yes.
Earlier on this week, I was mapping some codes that we were purchasing through our platform, and the GS1 codes were emanated from Australia, but we could adopt them.
Okay, well, see, we're on this up. I'm going to answer that question about funding available at the very end, if that's okay. How would you stop someone creating a standard that is different from GS1?
You wouldn't. There's nothing to stop anybody in the marketplace creating standards or platforms or creating a competitive environment. That's the world we live in. But this is about people taking a kind of holistic approach to the problem, almost looking at it kind of ethically. What do we want to do? Do we want to make this work, or do we want to go around in circles forever and ever, battling with data management and information and ambiguity? Or do we want to just get together and adopt this single version of the truth? They did it in retail. You know, shout to GS1 if people are not aware. There's information on their site about the journey that retail went on in order to become a collaborative environment. Because if we continue down the path of creating competition around data, then and not having it as collaboration, then we'll never reach that point of where we can all rely on this product data, this information.
Right. Who's going to take responsibility for that then, Phil, or who should?
Well, this is the challenge, isn't it? In the supply chain, there are some trade associations that are getting behind this. The EDA, they've been quite proactive in driving this, an understanding with their membership and getting behind.
Well, yeah, that's one acronym too many now. I've got to say, EDA, who are they then?
Sorry, Electrical Distributors Association.
Right, sorry, beg your pardon.
We've been working with. They've been part of the working group, and they've been having the conversations. And they're the ones that do seem to be kind of fairly forward thinking, I would say, in terms of the adoption or the benefits of promoting this approach with their members.
Okay, good. Right, well, so Phil, there's still a bit of inertia here, obviously, and trying to get this kind of pyramid at the bottom of the pyramid sorted out. We're all, if you go to Digital Construction Week like we were a few months ago, it was all on modeling and data and all this great stuff, and it was all really interesting. But there wasn't many people talking about procurement data and some real process and culture. But so any thoughts on that?
Yeah, lots.
Go on then.
You're right. There isn't a lot of conversation going on, or I'm not seeing enough conversation. Certainly not robust conversations anyway with the supply chain and setting a minimum expectation. At the moment, it just feels like this conversation's going on, but people can just do their own thing at the same time, and that's, for me, it's really frustrating, because there's a potential solution there that if it was well understood and we got behind it, it would bring value to the sector. So I would like to see more. Just to build upon what you said there about what's the industry doing. Well, here's some examples of what other industries have already done. There's the single unique identifiers. Obviously, there's an example there in retail of a GS1 code, but many other products or sectors have adopted single unique identifiers to improve their sector generally. And then some of these are very inexpensive as well. They can just, it's more about collaboration and just the agreement about what is the right way forward rather than being competitive.
Okay, more questions? How do you think AI and blockchain will be leveraged in the near term, now, to help solve the design to demolition data flow? I'm going to just say, we're now 6 years on from the Farmer Report. So I don't know what you mean by near term. And it's 30 years on since the Egan and the Latham Report. And when we were either apprentice or coming out of college, we all think we're coming to this great world of, we're all going to be collaborating and we're going to be building the teams and all this. You know, and I can imagine the people coming out of university these days must be thinking they're going to go into a world of BIM and 3D models and great stuff. So I don't know what, we could have a whole debate on what does near term mean, but obviously, like there is a massive disruptor like AI and blockchain. But is industry ready for it, Phil? And will it help?
I mean, I don't confess to be the experts on, you know, AI and blockchain. I've been on some events and to get a better understanding of it. And my understanding of perhaps blockchain is that, you know, it provides that kind of immutable thread of information. So from kind of integrity of information and supporting the technology side of things, I think that could potentially add value. But again, I think it's about everybody coming together and understanding, you know, what's important first of all, because the single unique identifier is both digital, in which case it's supported by blockchain, but it's also physical. If you pick up a product, it's physically it can be either on the product in terms of a label or on the packaging. So you know that is the item. It's got some sort of information that sits behind that. So yeah, I'm sorry I can't answer the question fully on AI and blockchain, but I think they're part of the solution.
Yes. But again, it's going back to this. Can we just identify where our single source of truth is going to be? I think that's a process and culture thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I think the 5 years I must have got I thought it was 6 years. It was, apologies if it's 5 years since the Farmer Report. Okay. Another as a comment here, I'm not sure. Said interesting, Chris, about DCW. It is the same comment around data and construction planning. Not sure, Phil. I don't know.
Yeah, I personally think DCW is almost a missed opportunity. I thought it was great networking event. You know, it was great to see people, especially after the pandemic when it's all been done online. But I just think there was too many conversations going on across too many stages. I think fewer discussions really focused in with getting a bigger target audience would be better. So I think DCW has a place to play in this solution. Yeah, so it could be better. Yeah,
well, maybe this is in terms of standards and things like that, and GS1 standards that we need to maybe have a bit more visibility. These things might be useful as well. That might help. And okay, but we're talking about the blockchain and AI being maybe a shift. But can you and how long we got left? Can't be that long left, is it? But
well, 12 minutes.
12 minutes. Well, I've got maybe one or maybe two, maybe another question, and then if any more comes up, then we can maybe wrap up. But what so it says about around widespread adoption, Phil. Do you think it'll take legislation such as the Building Safety Bill before we actually, the proverbial size 10s to actually come out before we see a culture shift? Or do you or is it just going to the technology, or is it a combination of both? We are largely we wait and see what legislation comes up before we act. We tend to in this industry rather than actually getting ahead. So what do you think?
I think if we reach that point where it becomes mandatory or it's legislation by government, I think we've all failed. Typically we only pass laws when there's individuals or parts of the society are doing things that they shouldn't be doing or counterproductive. So what we should be doing is we should be doing what works for the industry, what will add value. And there's a better way of working than we currently do at the moment. But it may well come to that, Chris. It may well happen that it just becomes imposed upon us. And I think if that happens, it's a sad day.
So we're next for the GS1 standards and that pyramid. We're next. Are we expecting to see any big developments in that this year coming up?
Well, we've got a number of meetings with GS1 coming up this year. And really it's going to be, GS1, they're very clear. They offer standards. They have information in terms of the product date, the product IDs, which is it does no IP against it. It's agnostic. They offer this with almost with open arms. I mean, they're a not-for-profit, so there's a funding element attached to it. Of course, they are. They have to, they have to have a sustainable model. But it's really up to everybody in the industry to look at it and embrace it and work together. And in some respects, they've no skin in the game like that. If we didn't want it, if the industry just almost ignores it and doesn't drive the solution, why should they be bothered?
Well, what about then, Phil, if you actually want a GS1 standard, what do? Do you just go and email them and say, right, okay, I want my product, a code? Is it as simple as that?
If you're a manufacturer, sorry. If you're a manufacturer, you simply buy batches of codes and you control the allocation of those codes against your products, and you can then use software systems, to create barcodes, etc. There's many platforms out there that will use the code and create a physical code for you. But the actual what they offer really, as I said, is collaboration. It's they're offering the information, the standards, in order to be used, because it's and in their quote, it's the global language of business. It's information that we can use to transact between different actors in the supply chain.
Okay, another good question for you. Well, two good questions here. I'll take from the bottom to the top here. How good is the support from merchants in providing data?
Can I swear? I mean, really? I'm pretty sure that this call's been recorded. And I don't want to be disparaging.
Keep it clean, Phil.
I don't want to be disparaging, but it's going to be very difficult for me to answer that without being. It's our biggest bugbear, if I'm honest. The merchants, and I know they've not done this with malice, but over the years they've created their own data systems, their own silos of product data to drive their platforms and their business models, and it's painful. We have to strip out and manipulate information that they send us. We really struggle. It's the biggest weakness in the whole supply chain, in my view.
We're not going any further into that one today, but yeah. Okay. Is it money a good way to incentivize manufacturers to comply? Couldn't NG Bailey and their peers propose a carrot and stick system to their suppliers?
Potentially. I mean, I'm always a bit wary of the carrot and stick, or even the, as it was referred to recently, carrot flavored stick. I'm not sure, because I mean, one minute we might be placing a large order and we might have leveraged in order to get the supply chain to adopt a different approach. But if they only did that for us, or in that one transaction, it's for nothing anyway, really. They're just doing it to appease us. So really, it's about looking at this more across the supply chain, and this more fundamental cultural change. But I think that there is a good argument that if people do come together and use their kind of strength in numbers to leverage the change, then maybe.
Well, but do you think then maybe tier ones and things like that, general, picking NG Bailey here personally, but do you think tier ones have got a key role in that then? Maybe showing a bit of leadership here and actually looking at the supply chain and looking beyond maybe, even just a project. What kind of mechanism? They've got a lot of influence, they've got a lot of buying power, So.
Yeah, but I think at the moment some of the tier ones are too far separated from the actual issues that are in the supply chain, because obviously we're an MEP contractor, so our focus is on this information, and I obviously see and kind of work with this every day, so I actually see the actual fundamental issues and where it goes wrong. But I think other people are perhaps too far away from the problem. But if they perhaps got close to it and understand, and in terms of solution, if adopting a solution like GS1 standards and the unique ID, it doesn't undermine or detract value from other processes. It can only enhance it, because it's, as I said, retail already do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, if it's not tier ones, what about clients? Are clients clued up on this? Generally speaking,
no.
Asset managers?
No, not really. I've had a few meetings with clients. I think that some of them do get it, but again, they're too disconnected from the problem, because ultimately, though, they do get the information through the models and through the manuals that we pass to them. But I'll bet that if you did a source straw poll of the quality of that data that they receive and is it actually usable, I'll pretty much guarantee the majority of cases they just throw it away and start again. If there's nothing, if there's no start of the thread, and then we give them some information, what they're going to use it, where's it going to hook into?
You get me thinking now, so I better listen. I better wrap up because only a few minutes left. 5 minutes left, Phil. Anyone, any more questions? Please just fire them in this now before we wrap up. But I was going to say, is funding available to help companies change? Maybe Phil, just maybe look at how did you fund the project? Maybe I'll ask for you, and then I can chuck in some CITB stuff that we're working on.
Well, when we developed our platform some 6-7 years ago now, it was self-funded. It wasn't a big expense for us as a large organisation. I think it was sort of less than 10 grand in terms of development costs for the platform. So I don't believe that these solutions are particularly expensive. Obviously, the time that it takes to get your head around it and have people in your business, and the smaller the business, the more challenge it is. Certainly, if you get down to the SME, sole traders, etc. But I think that's where the supply chain has a part to play to just kind of deliver it, just provide it automatically.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, in terms of funding, there is some CITB funding available for training. No, not product training or product investment. There is some like low. Well, certainly in Scotland here anyway, we've got some digital development loans. I'm not exactly sure what it's like in England, but I know there is some things like that. But there's plenty of stuff out there in terms of funding support from the CITB. There's lots of good resources, I would say, as well. Well, we have some on our digital construction website, but also the supply chain school here is a great source of just knowledge and gathering this information together. And I'm just very grateful for the supply chain school for having this conversation today, Phil. So thanks very much for your time today.
My pleasure, Chris, and thanks for reaching out.
Yeah.
Thanks to Naomi for organising it as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Naomi.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Great conversation. I've just put the feedback form link in the chat. I always beg people to complete it, but it really helps us kind of just make sure our sessions are really suitable for what we want to learn about. So yeah, I really hope you've got some good information out today and it's inspired you. So yeah, keep a lookout on our website for future events, and I'll close this session now.
Right.
Well.